Next here on this evening's show, another top head has rolled on the President's order. The high-ranking general has been sacked from his position at the Ministry of Defence for bungling his income declaration, and soon it may become even easier for officials to fall foul of Medvedev's anti-corruption drive.
Yeah, our man Jacob Greaves is here to fill us in. Jacob, good evening. Well, who's fallen out of favour with the President this time?
Well, the man in question here is Viktor Gaidukov. Now, he is a major general, or was a major general, I should say, sorry, and he was actually in charge with dealing with Russia's nuclear defence, so a fairly important person. Now, he has been dismissed because he failed to correctly disclose his earnings. It's an unprecedented move under President Medvedev's watch as well, for such a top official to be sacked for this particular reason.
You mentioned income declarations there, Jake. Do you have a few more details on this?
Yeah, sure. Well, if we want to understand why exactly this man has been let go, well, we have to go back to April. Now, this is when President Medvedev instigated a measure that saw all government officials and civil servants have to disclose their earnings and the earnings of their spouse and children. Now, the President and Prime Minister Vladimir Putin, they led by example in this case, giving away exactly what they earned. But some officials, as we said, dragged their feet, and the Finance Ministry has recently been looking for a loophole in this piece of legislation that means their employees don't have to disclose this information. But let's bring this back up to date a bit. Well, come 1st of June, there is an act instigated, brought into force, which means that the government can sack anyone who doesn't give this information correctly. And the Russian president has used this act to its full power in this particular case. It's the first time, like I said, that he has done so. So really, he's sending a very clear-cut message how important transparency is to him and weeding out corruption within the government.
Jacob, as much as the public loves a bit of off-with-their-heads action, are there any other measures out there to prevent government officials abusing their position?
Well, yeah, sure, there is actually a new draft bill that's being talked about. Now, this is looking at different ways to find corrupt officials. Now, what this is actually really wanting to do is compare their earnings with their spendings, and in particular, whether or not their spending outstrips their earning by 20%. Now, just to take an example, if a government official was to earn, say, 1 million rubles, and they were to spend in that same year 1,200,000 rubles, then this new draft bill would look to investigate that and ask why and how exactly they've come across that money, see if there's any fishy business going on. And if there was, if it was that money was gotten illegally, well, then they would face a suspension of between 1 and 3 years from their posts, and also they'd have to give back any money that they have gotten illegally. Now, the real kicker in this draft piece of legislation is the fact that they only want to focus on sums of money of 3 million rubles. So talking about the top levels of corruption here. And we've actually spoken to the politician behind this draft piece of legislation who explained why that is.
We're trying to catch big fish. That's why we want to introduce a 20% margin in cases where this adds up to more than 3 million rubles. We should aim to eradicate large-scale corruption first and then switch to minor cases. That's why we consider the draft law as a temporary measure. But we think it's very unlikely this bill will in fact be passed.
And Jacob, is Russia alone in the problems it's facing in trying to tackle illegal expenses among officials?
No, Russia surely, it definitely isn't alone when it comes to dealing with problems with transparency and abuses among officials. You only have to look at the UK and the expenses scandal that really gripped British politics just last year. I mean, there it has to be said, it was more about how taxpayers' money and MPs' allowances were being spent, which highlights some examples. Some MPs use them to clean their moat or clean their duck house. Now, this obviously angered British voters, but it does raise an example of how there are problems with transparency and abuses within power, even in a democracy that has been functioning for a lot longer than Russia's. Now, of course, I have to stress that Russia's problem is fundamentally about corruption, and that is what they're trying to tackle.
Right, well, talking to us about the latest in the anti-corruption drive, that's our correspondent Jacob Greaves. Thank you very much for that. And for an expert view on this, we're joined by Ninenko from Transperency International. Thank you so much for coming. Pleasure to have you with us. How likely do you think this spending cap law will be passed?
Well, I think eventually it will be passed. I mean, in an optimistic scenario, it will be passed this year and it will happen next year. Well, pessimistic scenario, it can happen in like 10 years when we'll finally decide that we cannot fight corruption without it. Well, it is obvious that we need a law controlling spendings of public officials. Well, it is obvious and every country is doing it. And you cannot fight corruption without it. But they can postpone it and try not to have it this year or next year. But this is a good sign that we are talking about it. And a good sign is that we already have a declaration of property and income. So this is a big step forward.
This draft law allows officials to spend 20% more than they earn. Is this a hint on illegal income?
Well, this law currently, how it is described, is kind of, well, not really professional, because the problem is not only about this 20% on how much it is more, because we also should take into consideration his savings. Because if he officially announced that he has some savings, for example, he used to be a businessman before coming to politics, then he sells all his business, he has lots of money. So during his time being like State Duma deputy, he'll be earning not that much money, but he'll have some savings.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So this law, I would say this law needs to be changed. Needs to be, well, they need some extra.
Just worked on.
Yeah, worked on. The whole idea is great about declaration of spendings. The whole idea of this division between spendings and earnings, and this particular year is quite unprofessional, I would say. I mean, you need to look deeper into this whole thing.
What kind of success has this system of declaring expenditure had in other countries?
Well, I can look at any country where the situation was kind of problematic. Like in Indonesia, there was quite a big success with whole this system being implemented. Well, it was part of the system. There was also a court system specially implemented for anti-corruption cases and several other things. But this is also part of the solution. It is never the ultimate solution. You cannot change the whole thing only by declaration, but it is always part of the solution.
But it's had a positive effect when it's been tried.
Of course, and I'm pretty sure it will have, and it is already having some positive effects in Russia. And just recently, yesterday, there was an announcement that the president have signed an order to resign one of the army officials who didn't declare all of his property. And it is going to be happening again and again, and well, at least it is becoming to be public what they own, and the whole idea of maybe not owing too much, being an official.
And just briefly, there are some concerns that this could actually provoke more corruption for those who want to get around this law. Would that be happening?
You can't name this more corruption. This is the whole idea is that right now you can take money as a bribe and spend them right away and nobody will care. And you come to your job on an expensive car, you wear an expensive watch, you have a huge house, and nobody will be asking questions about
where you got it from.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for talking to us. Ninenko from Transperency International.
Thank you.